Howdy folks, and welcome to a brand new segment of Star Trek Ships Online, Star Trek Online Edition. This time, as I promised, we'll be talking about the Starship class. But Blueset, that's not a Starship class, that's the Constitution class. But trust your brother Blueset, as this is indeed the Starship class. Look at the dedication plaque on the original series, even on Memory Alpha. And also to other various Star Trek enthusiast websites. They actually will show the dedication plaque for the original Star Trek Enterprise, well, not Star Trek Enterprise, but the Starship Enterprise, stating U.S.S. Enterprise Starship class. This is also considered to be called the Class 1 Heavy Cruiser. Now this is by far the original Constitution class. Of course, in Star Trek Online, as you can see here, this is not the original design model, as, if I were to pan, there's actually a lot more windows here in the next section. And because of the whole update with everything, yay, I'm able to fly around without issue of running into a sector border. So that's all good. This is actually a very beautiful ship. And unfortunately, it's a Tier 1 vessel, so it doesn't get that much of use in the game of Star Trek Online, because after a day of playing the game, you're already Tier 2, Tier 3. So, yeah. Which means you're already Lieutenant Commander and Commander rank, if you're Federation. So, what about the Starship class? Well, first of which, the Starship class has actually been in service for Starfleet since the 2240s to the 2270s. Specifically, the U.S.S. Enterprise had a dedication time of the 2240s. Now, here we go. Finally looked at it. Yes, U.S.S. Enterprise is actually been launched in 2254 under the command of Captain Robert April. This captain is actually the first captain to command the ship Enterprise, mainly U.S.S. Enterprise. We all know, and there is going to be a bit of an argument, but hear me out. The first Enterprise for Starfleet was captained by Captain Archer. But this is the first U.S.S. Enterprise, so there is an actual specific difference, and why, in Deep Space Nine, they were actually correct in that statement. And of course, this is the first Enterprise for the Federation. Oops. Now, suffice to say, it's a good ship, but what about the specs for this thing? Well, the specs for this thing is actually pretty interesting. Speed-wise, it can actually achieve warp speeds of 6 for a nice cruising speed, a maximum of warp 8, and at extreme risk of blowing up the engines at some points, it can reach the warp of warp 9. Now, this was still using the same warp equation from Star Trek Enterprise. Now, after an engine upgrade, specifically with Kelvin engine modifications, this particular craft can actually really reach the speeds of warp 11. Now, with a warp engine malfunction or overload, as seen many times in the original series, the ship can actually achieve an outstanding warp factor of warp 14.1. Now, this was still using the original equation, but this also means that the ship did not go everywhere and anywhere at any given time, and that's not actually possible. So again, it's still debunked from what Voyager has done. That wasn't warp 10. But thing is, Enterprise can only hold that speed for only a few minutes with that overload. So there is a issue about that. Now, what about armaments? Armaments for this thing. It had multiple phaser banks. Specifically, it had twin phaser banks. Don't you mean dual phaser banks, Blueset? No, actual twins. They work in unison, acting as one singular while using energy conservation while still hitting just as hard. You gotta understand, these ships were made during a time where conflict with the Romulan Empire after the Earth-Romulan War is still fresh, and conflict with the Klingon Empire is starting to rise. So these starships were actually made specifically for war. But they're still being sent out for exploration and diplomatic missions, so this was still very modular. The standard complement of ships that this thing could actually handle in the 2250s was 205. 205 was actually the crew complement during the missions such as the Cage, which was actually the original pilot for the Star Trek original series, having having Captain Christopher Pike as the captain for the series. Well, that particular pilot actually fell out of the water and was actually, in a sense, denied. But it would have been interesting to have a bit of a Dick Tracy-esque Star Trek series. But I digress. It wasn't until pretty much 10 years later, or the second pilot, that the ship complement was increased to 430. This included the captain of Captain James T. Kirk and his, the intrepid crew of the Enterprise that we know today, carrying over with formerly Captain Spock, but back then would have been Commander Spock, Lieutenant Uhura, Lieutenant Sulu, and eventually, later on, Lieutenant Chekhov, and with compliments of Lieutenant Commander Scotty, and at the time, Chief Science Medical Officer, or just Chief Medical Officer in Science Department, Dr. Leonard McCoy, whose rank equivalent in Starfleet is that of Commander, as in his position to be Chief, he had to be Commander rank. So there you go. Now, eventually, later on in the series, I do believe second season of the original series, they eventually got Chekhov as a doctor. He was wearing a yellow vest, or was it red? No, he was wearing a yellow vest because he was part of the administrative sector. But he was still knowledgeable in engineering. So, because of his expertise and knowledge as a warp theorist, and many other departments that he's actually specialized in, he wore a gold shirt because of the administrative section. So yes, there you go. Now, armaments for this thing, I know I trailed off here. Armaments include phaser banks, the twin banks. I think there were 3 on the ventral and dorsal, making it 6 in forward, and at least 1 in the aft. And so far, there are actually 6 forward photon torpedo tubes, and as well as 1 torpedo launcher in the aft. Now you guys may be saying, that's a lot of torpedo launchers in the front. Well, thing is, these are tubes, not launchers. They act differently, so there can be 6. That means there can be multiple launchers there, but they can load up 6 torpedoes in the tubes and forward and launch them forward in a consecutive or following sequence, or pairing or grouping. So, in a sense, it was forward operated, and if enemy was in the aft, you had a launcher that had projected backwards. So it was a good deterrent, no different than in most warships in the Navy had an aft cannon in the back. Not big, but just enough to be more of a deterrent. Now, the defenses is deflector shielding. Now, this is where I get to talk about the whole scenario about who is better or who's more advanced, Star Wars or Star Trek. Well, thing is, the deflector array did start in the original series. In fact, they only got better later on in the series. In Next Generation, the Generation films, and, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager. They got better. But it's still the same technology. All they did is reinforce the shielding and enhance the matrix. That's it. Otherwise, it's still the same principles. It's not technically shielding, well, still it is, but it's not special about it. It is still, in a sense, a mass emitter array of deflectors and deflector generators, just to build a substantial shielding around the ship. No different than in Star Wars for, your X-Wings, your other ships, your Star Destroyers, your TIE Fighters. They have their little deflector shielding arrays as well. But for them, it's different. But it's still the same concept. So, in a sense, they both equal in that factor. Just power differences. We all know that Star Destroyers are huge. That means they have a huge powerhouse. So they're going to have shields last longer than, say, Star Trek vessels, because they're not that big. So there's that argument. Am I saying they're better? I'm a bit biased here, considering that you're watching a person talk about Star Trek ships. So, biased. And that's pretty much about it. Now, the specific lengths, because this became a bit of a determinate thing. The Starship class actually had a determinate length of 289 meters in length. This became the de facto go-to measurement to say, okay, what is the standard measurement of a starship? Okay, why don't we go with the Starship class or the Constitution class? Okay, let's go ahead and do that. That's considered one's cruiser length. That actually works. So anything of roughly 300 meters is a starship in length. And that was the whole determining factor. Now, the Starship line lasted from the 2240s to the 2270s. And amount of impressive array of technology and information gathering and whatnot has been done, as well as peacekeeping and gathering. But of course, it did end in the 2270s, but however, that's because all the Starship class were called in to Earth and Utopia Planitia to be refitted and pretty much made a brand new ship, which leads to the Constitution class. Excuse me. To the Constitution class. The Enterprise itself has been around for a very long time. In fact, when they said the Starship Enterprise is 50 years old, they really do mean it. The ship is indeed old, but it's been around for a very long time. In fact, since the 2245s, it's been going on a very good long time. And they were thinking of decommissioning the old girl from its successes. And basically they're wanting to replace her with a different ship. Kept the same name, but different registry. Kirk had a bit of a different motive, I would say. He did not want the ship named Enterprise to actually lose face, but mainly he's upset because they are decommissioning her. And also too, he had a mission to go and retrieve Spock's body. Or at least go to the planet Genesis. But of course that's Constitution class, not the Starship class. But yes, the ship line has done a lot of work. Now, as of the 2267, there were literally approximately 12 Starship class ships in the fleet. And this was mentioned in the original series, Tomorrow is Yesterday. Basically, there were 12 ships in total. These did include a unknown ship, simply named as the NCC 1700. This also included the U.S.S. Constellation, the U.S.S. Defiant, which, during one particular episode, actually went through space-time and actually appeared in a mirror universe, specifically the past mirror universe and Mirror into Darkly, where the IS Enterprise encountered the USS Defiant, took it from the Tholians, and actually created a new empire using that same technology. They didn't really improve much of the technology, so basically it's still the same technology, just a slight variant. And of course the USS Enterprise, the USS Excalibur, Exeter, Hood, Intrepid, Lexington, and Potomac. All these things were mentioned about certain places and certain spots in the war. Some of them were actually based off the ships they were named after. Let's see here. The Enterprise was from the HMS Enterprise. Defiant, HMS Defiant. There was the HMS Intrepid, if I'm not mistaken. Now, the USS Lexington is based off the Battle of Lexington on Bowling Green. So you got that. Potomac Bay in the DC area and Maryland area during the War of 1812. And there are various other ships, but these were the more iconic vessels that you can actually list off of. What's interesting to note is that the registry numbers, why specifically very simple numbers, you know, the 4 letters, and why specifically those numbers being used, like 1701 or 1700. Well, when they were making the ships into the registry, they said, well, it had to be legible in the distance. You know, it had to be recognizable before the ship name. So that's why they went with that registry numbers when they were making the series. And of course, when you look at all this, you think, oh, it's just a bunch of tubing and whatnot. But you gotta understand, even though, you know, Star Trek Enterprise was very similar and it looked advanced, you gotta understand, their nacelles were completely exposed. No, I'm not kidding. They were completely exposed. The Enterprise refit, you know, the NX-01 refit, would have actually had those nacelles actually covered up, forming in a shape what we're actually seeing right now, being more round, because that was the design of how it was made back then. And they didn't have curvature in the pylons because they needed to be straight. They didn't have that advanced design to have curvature in the warp nacelles. So again, that made sense. So pretty much any ship design for the Starship class actually originated from the Enterprise model of NX-01 and NX-02, pretty much from the NX project. Now, the ship has actually been through many major events in Starfleet history. And you gotta understand, for a lot of the star dates, there are several days and months after the Federation was formed. And at times, years. Well, if you hear the star date 1709, well, you have to understand, the Federation was formed in 2161. Yeah, that's how early the Federation was formed. In the Star Trek series, especially for Captain Kirk, that's in 2260, in the 2260s. That's pretty impressive because it's almost 100 years later. Yeah, get the reference there, right? So, in a sense, going from original series to, say, Next Generations, you can get from the 4-digit mark to the 6 and 7 digit mark, but that's because here it is 2409. The Federation is over 200 years old, getting close to, well, hang on. No, I'm very wrong on that statement. 21, 22, okay. Yeah, so roughly 300 years, and if the game goes to 2461, then it is going to be 400 years old. So yeah, it's pretty much 300 years, over 300 years old. The Federation is actually now a well-respected civilization. You know, it's been going on for literal centuries. Now, thinking of any part of original series or just iconic starships from any point, you know, the old classic ships, this actually started the whole classic arrangement of a cruiser. You have your primary hull or your habitation hull or habitat hull. You got your neck. You got your secondary hull or second hull. You got your pylons. And you got your warp nacelles. Well, this is the engineering section. You know, anything that requires the greater power gets sent here because it has direct connection to the warp core. This has its own power, but it's still tied to the warp core, but not as greatly. Most science labs and sick bays are within the secondary hull. Well, okay, yeah, this is technically the primary hull. So yeah, in the primary hull, anything heavy inducive like most research labs and engineering labs, secondary hull or engineering section of this ship. This ship was actually originally designed for a saucer separation, but it was only for an emergency setup. The original concept was built up during one particular oh, okay, my cat is on the back of my chair and is turning around. Yeah, wiggling my chair. Anyways, the ship itself was designed to actually have a emergency saucer separation of where if the core was to be going to a breach. Back then there was no actual warp core ejection except for a saucer separation, and it was only for emergency. They had deadbolts, in a sense, or explosive bolts that would actually explode and separating a specific line in the ship, causing the saucer to actually separate with a bit of the neck, and would actually use an impulse power over here from the impulse reactor in the habitation center, or primary hull, the saucer section, to pretty much coast at sublight speeds to get away from the impending explosion of the warp core. And I need to get a new mouse, but that's another thing. Now, later on that was revised and pretty much said, okay, well, instead of a emergency separation, why don't we have it where it can be a planned separation, where the ship can actually detach itself and reconnect? Well, we've seen this in the Star Trek Next Generations, where the Enterprise, during the first 2 episodes, which is actually a long pilot, with introducing to the American viewers Patrick Stewart, Jonathan Frakes, John Delancey, and various others. Lamar Burton, or I am butchering his name. Geordi, yes. I am so sorry if you're listening to this for butchering your character's name. And I think you're probably going to say, it's fine. Most other dedicated people will get it right. I'm just Got used to it. Anyway, LeVar Burton. There you go. Yes, LeVar Burton. I'm sorry for butchering your name. Oh boy, just don't hate me. Anyways, and of course, Brent Spiner and various other people. So I'm just not going to list them all off. But what about Will Wheaton? Yes, Will Wheaton too. Oh, God. Anyways, so yeah. I mean, various other things, but yeah, pretty much something similar to that. They would have actually had feet to allow to have proper alignment and to slide into place and lock. That would have been cool, but a bit out of their budget. Now, there are various positions and whatnot, seeing different silhouettes of the ship, and the ship is actually really not that big. I mean, holding only, at the time, 203, and later on, 430 crew, you think that the ship must be huge, like in the 2009 Star Trek film. Actually, no. This thing was built like a submarine, meant to be compact on its quarters. So, in a sense, most crew, mainly enlisted, crewmen, were literally packed in like sardines. But if you go to any military base and were allowed in to look at their barracks and see their enlisted crew quarters, you can agree that they're pretty much boxed in like sardines, but they still have space to get out of the bunks, get dressed, go to the latrines, and do their hygienical things, and then go to work. That's pretty much how it is. Unlike today, where the luxury of home, or any time you see in the Star Trek series, you usually see an officer's quarters, where it's actually pretty large, almost as large as a regular room, or a crew quarter in a sense on size, but only one bed, and the rest of the space is used up by other stuff, or even bigger. But in pretty much that sense, officer quarters is a bit larger, but not really that large, but just enough of where the officer can go to the quarters, lounge a bit, kind of think, read a book or a manual, and then when it's their turn to back on the shift, they can go back to the ship, to DOT. And luxurious for them is that they have their own showers and stuff. No different than what we've seen in the schematic layouts for Enterprise. Officers have their own personal shower areas. At least part of the senior officers. But in any case, any officers, yeah, they got their own showers. They got treated. Some of them have to bunk up with others, but not a whole lot, like enlisted. But it's to be expected. So, in a sense, it was designed in mind of back then when Gene Roddenberry was actually in the Navy. And yes, this is actually very true. And a bit of a trivia for you guys. Gene Roddenberry's vessel that he was stationed on during the Second World War, and also, too, during, I think, Vietnam? Oh, no, I think he was on Vietnam. In Korea. Yeah, Vietnam and Korea. That's right. He wasn't during the Second World War. Well, he was pretty up there. Might as well have been Second World War. No, yeah, Second World War. Yeah, just Second World War. And maybe Korea. His ship was the U.S.S. Lexington. And actually the first ship he wanted to put there was the Lexington. But, although yes, we do have the Lexington in the game, or at least the Lexington in the ship registry in the series, we wanted to go with Enterprise, or it was voted as, okay, let's go with Enterprise, because that's the latest Navy ship, nuclear powered flight deck carrier. There we go. That's what I was thinking. And even with all its, even down to one nuclear reactor, it was faster than the United States fleet. So they thought, well, we might as well have Enterprise as the fastest ship in our TV series as well. So they might as well say, okay, fine, we can do that. And it was voted in as Enterprise, the leading ship name. Now, as you probably might see, depending if I have time for you guys, is the physical arrangement of Enterprise, and specifically the not Constitution, that's something else. Starship class actually had various appearances and visuals. Different shapes of different lengths of the pylons, different positions of the pylons, different lengths of the nacelles, length of the neck, height of the saucer, and the height of the bridge cupola, which is this thing. Yes, this is actually the bridge cupola. I can't zoom in any further, but this little bit here, the little bobble here, that's actually the bridge itself. The bridge is actually small, but it's meant to be because you don't want that many people up there anyways. So it's only meant for bridge crew only, and to relieve people. What few people are there to actually do some duty rosters, get things signed, and then off they'll go. It's not like in the Next Generation where the bridge is larger because there's multiple facets to go to. It's not like later on in this series, Generations, in this case Next Generations, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, that we got a larger bridge to compass because people go to and from, going to different areas of the Deck 1, because Deck 1 during Next Generations onward included the bridge. So people can actually walk to and from, go to different turbolifts, go to different areas, and so on and so forth. And just so anybody would ask, if you actually watch carefully on any Next Generations TV series, you can see that it is round. There is no port or door to go to the bathroom. You have to leave the bridge through the only turbolift, which is right here, right where the pointer is pointing at the very tip. That's where the turbolift is at, and that's where they have to go to be able to use the latrine to go bathroom. So yeah, I know, potty stuff, but that's a big question that was made in the series. Where do they go bathroom? It's not like in Star Trek Enterprise where there was a specific door they could go to use their latrine. But again, they still had to go use the turbolift to get out of Deck 1 to go to the main latrine. So there you go. A bit of a trivia note. This was actually a bit known in Next Generation onwards because of the schematics that was made. But in the original series schematics, the Starfleet Technical Manual that was made after the series was done, that Gene Roddenberry and various other people actually made, which gave him the funding to make the Star Trek motion picture, which it's a good movie, but it will bore you if you're an average movie watcher. But it's a nice, beautiful movie. Not really much action, but it's the first film, so it's artsy. But yes, it was mentioned in the Next Generation about taking the captain's yacht out for a spin. We didn't get to see that happen until pretty much Star Trek Insurrection. That particular thing actually did had a captain's yacht that comes out of the saucer of the ship. The Next Generation ship, the Galaxy class, same thing. It actually does have a captain's yacht at the bottom of the ship, or bottom of the saucer section, and so does this ship. Technical manual will actually state that there is actually a captain's gig. Actually, technically, this was called a captain's gig, And the captain's gig is actually right here, right where this circular disc is. This is not the sensor dome. No, this is actually the captain's gig. And it had to be given permission from Starfleet Command to, well, mainly just the chain of command, you know, to allow the captain to use the captain's yacht, because only for special missions, you know, could the captain use the captain's gig, you know, to, if, you know, certain things were to happen, and if deemed necessary. Sometimes they'll just take it out because it's their ship. Very simple, it's their ship. They can do that because it is their ship. But not all starships have that equipped, where the captain's gig was installed or built into the ship. Sometimes it is just a sensor dome. In this case, we do have an actual captain's gig here. And in the original series, they did want that to actually come popping out, and it was going to look like an actual UFO. You know, it had little lander feet, it would extend out, and it would have actually had a little gangplank, in a sense, to where the captain and 4 others, no different than a regular shuttlecraft, though luxurious in space and accommodations, could actually stretch their legs on the inside, you know, literally relax. Nice comfortable seats, by the way. It's not that, you know, Austin Powers, oh baby, yeah, type thing. No, it's not that. No, I'm talking about seats. Leather seats. Oh yeah, very fine seats. Anyways. So yeah, they were supposed to have that, you know, sits 5. The captain is pretty much the pilot, or he has a specific pilot to pilot the craft for him. And pretty much it had all the functions of a regular shuttlecraft of the time. Again, you know, cost of production, they could not get that to go through with it. And pretty much, yeah. So that's pretty much about it. Now, everyone knows that this particular point is the main shuttle bay for the ship right over here. This particular part can actually accommodate several vessels, and the shuttle bay did actually take up literally 2, maybe even 3 decks because of the size to allow, if in a very busy spaceport, various shuttlecraft to go to and from. The Starship actually does have Class F shuttlecraft, which is the Galileo. Right, it had a complement of Class Fs, at least 3, maybe 4 Class Fs, and the size is equivalent to that of the Type 8 shuttlecraft in the series, or maybe a bit longer than that because of how it was, and it works so well. And there is actually a restoration program going about to restore the Galileo to its original functional studio set appearance and functionality. And my cat is playing at a plastic egg, even though it's not Easter anymore. Oh well, he loves to play that thing. Anyways, and there are actually several other types of shuttlecraft it actually had, and if I can find it here real quick. Alright, so I did find it. Basically, designated on size, and it is actually 2 decks in height, and technically 3 because of the curvature of the ship. It actually is located on deck 17 of the Starship class, and pretty much it can hold a complement of 4 Class F shuttlecrafts, and you know they're actually of reasonable size. They're the equivalent of roundabouts in a sense, but they could not go to warp, so they could only go sublight. And sublight means that they are, in very much sense, just barely hitting speed of light. And if you hit speed of light, you're going warp. So they have no warp core, even though they look like they have warp nacelles. That's actually the impulse engines right there. Because, yeah. Of course, the impulse engine is actually at the very far back, but it doesn't matter. There is no actual warp engines. It's just made to look the part, but it's really just landing struts and various other compartments for it. And pretty much, yeah. Now, it can also handle various other small crafts as well, but they were tucked away somewhere else. But mainly, the most it can handle is for Type F's or Class F shuttlecrafts. Now, it's not surprising that some of you guys are probably saying, well, okay, well, what about the interior? I heard that Star Trek Online does have proper interiors. For this ship. Well, you're not disappointed. They do. I mean, the ship is actually technically cheap, but there is quite a bit of a price thing for it. It was actually part of a pack to have the ship, the interior, the costumes, the phasers, and the shuttlecraft. And that was actually a bit of a pack, but it was still cheap, you know, roughly about $10–15 to be able to get it. A reasonable price at the time, but still, it's roughly about $7 just for the ship itself in Star Trek Online. Now, in-game armaments is your standard Tier 1 vessel on appearances and functionality. 3 bridge officer slots, tactical, engineering, and science. 3 weapon slots, 2 forward, 1 aft. When you first get this ship, it does come equipped, not with me, with special weaponry, the refit weapons. The refits are actually unique to the ship. That's why it's $7. It's unique. You know, it's unique to the ship, and you can equip it to any other ship, and it does level up with the character, and you can upgrade the I did not know I had you there. Okay, you can upgrade it, which I actually just ruined it right now. Whoops. But it is upgradable. You know, it is infinite. Basically, it levels up with you, but after a while, you may want to actually go and upgrade. Upgrade it automatically kicks it up to Mark 12. You know, damage and critical age. Actually, no. It just popped damage to it. Hang on. Yeah, okay, so it is damage and critical age, as it was supposed to be. But, yeah, it's pretty much a unique item, just for the ship. Turn rate, it actually has a fair turn rate. You know, for a cruiser, it's the same as the Tier 1 light cruiser that you have when you start the game. You know, the Miranda class, Centaur class, and the Shikara class. You know, the starter ship that you get, mainly Miranda class. It actually, of the Tier 1 vessels, it has the most hull at 12,000, even here in space. Standard shieldings, and it has +3 to all ability types, as you can see here. Well, that's fine and dandy, but let's see the interior, Blue said. Ah, you're gonna like this. We do have the interior, and it is the Constitution, or Shapoopy. Let's fix that. There we go. Much better. Yes. We got the original Original bridge. Well, if I could get in the captain's seat. There we go. Yes. Now it would be more appropriate to actually have the original series costume on. Wait. I got it. I think I do have... Haha. Yes. Dress uniform, baby. Anyways. Right, so here is actually the bridge. And I am not kidding. This is actually the main bridge. It is circular. You're not going to get any better than this. It's circular. You know, I mean, there's even a dedication plaque right in the corner that is actually legible. Yes. Dedicated to the men and women who served on the U.S.S. Enterprise NCC 1701. Right. And he even had the original series handlebars to be able to grip, turn, and say where you need to go, like deck 15, deck 12, deck 5, or engineering. So let's head to the crew deck. And here's Captain's quarters. You see, it's no different than a regular quarters. But, you know, I mean, here's the shower over here. I mean, this is pretty much all designed over the original series for the Enterprise. But yeah, this is pretty much just that. Even the old monitors they have over here. And of course, there's crew running around in their original series uniform. We even have the lounge. Yep, the lounge. Even here, you can actually open and close the blast shutters. See, in combat, those are closed, so that way, because these, at the time of making it, are glass, but they're technically transparent aluminum. I know, it's a thing. And I mean, you could go either way. I mean, you even can go into the Jeffries tube. You even go to the conference room. Access library, interact. I mean, oh yeah. And of course, again, the blast shutters and whatnot. Yep. I mean, all this stuff is actually pretty cool. So yeah, I mean, circular, curved. I mean, heck, even the drop kick. Oh yeah, even here, you have a McCoy-esque appearance. Even the original sounds. I love that. And various different appearances of whatnot. Even though technically all Starfleet NPCs are actually in the standard clothing or uniform now. And I just totally went through that door. So yeah, let's go ahead and head to engineering. Here we are at engineering, and this is actually not main engineering. This is actually specific to note because this particular one is not the actual original engineering deck. Engineering deck is actually 2 levels. This is actually the impulse reactor area. So this is the impulse engine room, or impulse engineering for the saucer section. And because main engineering is, of course, this technically is also, you know, the warp reactor here. But you can see it's all built in. It can't eject proper. So yeah. But you do have the appearances. So it's a bit of an oops on many people to make that mistake. But here's Engineering Lab. Used for various things to find out what's really going on and whatnot. I mean, heck, if I can find it, I'll show you transporter room. Yes, here it is. Here's the original transporter room. Oh, this is so awesome. Too bad that they don't have the actual sound it makes. You know, the transporter sound when you go and use it. Because that would have made everyone's day. But that's pretty much about it. How much does the ship cost? Actually, $7 just for the ship itself. And it does come with its unique phaser arrays, as well as its own unique interior. Costume and ship itself are separate, but with the bundle, at least, let's see here, $12 maybe you can spend to pretty much pay for anything that you want. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, for most of you guys who may not know, that the original series only had 3 seasons, and literally the Starship Enterprise had a 5-year mission. Well, every 5 years it goes back to Earth to get refit, you know, either major repairs, major refits, and gets resupplied for another 5-year mission. Well, for Kirk, his time was to take the Enterprise on another 5-year mission. Well, even though the original series ended at 3, the animated season actually continued for a while, continuing off where season 3 left off. And after season 3 ended, it was pretty much to the end of the original series. But it wasn't until we get the movie reboot, or not really reboot, but until we got the actual movie that brought Star Trek to the silver screen, did we get to actually have Star Trek on the main screen. Even though it was an artsy film, we still have the very most iconic film ship that has been put to film for Star Trek, other than, you know, the Sovereign class. I mean, the shuttlecraft, it's a bit cheap, about roughly $5. Costume is roughly $3. Now, the shuttlecraft is about $5 because of the pet that you can actually get from it. And it has its own unique shuttlecraft beam array on it that is also blue. But technically, that shuttlecraft isn't meant for combat. In Star Trek Online, all shuttlecraft were meant for combat. So there you go. That's the reason why it has its own unique weaponry. Otherwise, no. Only the Starship itself was meant to be combat orientated. Yeah. So that's pretty much about it. I mean, you could argue, oh, what about the shuttlecraft for Enterprise? Well, yes, they did have weaponry on there, but it was literally a particle, just a particle cannon meant to actually shoot at asteroids or meteorite. Otherwise, it has no shielding. Neither did the Class Fs. But there you go. I hope you guys do enjoy this, and enjoy the rest of the slideshow of pictures that I have up for you guys. And I will definitely see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.